Hello, hello, and welcome back to Fire Emblem, the Seven Siblings, a Fire Emblem 8 ROM hack by WarPath. And last time we finished the hack, so the demo currently goes up to Chapter 9, which is about 12 chapters, including the guide maps that we played. And in this video, I'm going to go through all of the units and share some of my overarching thoughts on the hack and what I think needs to improve. One thing I will say is that my critique will be largely based on how early stage this is. WarPath has done everything himself to this point, and this is really his first foray into the public with the hack. So, there's going to be errors, there's going to be room for improvement. I think that there's something that, I think he's committed to fixing it up and making it better. And it takes a lot of playtesting, and kind of playtesting it in this open way, I know for me as a creator is super helpful, and so I hope this feedback is also very helpful for him as he continues to make upgrades and improvements, right? It's only 12 chapters. That's a pretty sizable demo to show, like, hey, this project is no joke, and so I'm excited to see kind of where this goes. So I'm going to go through all the units that we have here. The Village of Silence chapter is actually just the Village of Silence from FE8, so you get Tethys, which was kind of odd. But the dialogue hadn't been changed, so let's get into it, shall we? So Ariana. So I gotta say, Ariana was. I felt like her usefulness kind of fluctuated a little bit throughout most of this so far. In the early maps, I mean, she's essential. She's one of your few units. She doubles pretty consistently from the get-go. You can get her a steel bone. She does a bit more damage and occasionally can double with that. I'd say as the maps got tougher, she definitely took on more of a niche role, and as other units started taking over and the map became denser, her inability to counter close up or at one range was really detrimental to her overall usability. And I mean, that's nothing new, right? She's an archer. She's going to have this problem. But the problem is that because she's your lord too, it's easy for her to fall behind. Like, I had to be very diligent about using her to keep her up with levels, and she didn't really level up super great in the strength department. She was progressively becoming a little bit harder to use. Like in that last chapter, she was able to one round the wyverns, which was really nice. But I think that was only because she had gotten like a strength level up the time before. Like 8 strength to level 14 for your lord is not great, but she does have 15 speed, so she doubles everything pretty consistently. So she does make pretty good use of her player phase. I wish she was I would want her to be a little bit more top loaded. Personally, but I don't think that's something that you need to do. Like, it's your game, it's your design. Lords, I guess, part of the reason like a sword lord is so balanced is because there are so many other units that use swords that are less balanced. So like you have guys like Eliwood or Roy or folks like that who are like pretty like well balanced overall. Like their stat spread is pretty even, I would say, across the board. And Ariana looks kind of to skew towards speed, of course, but like kind of fit that mold of more like balanced. But archers are just by nature a niche class because of how they're used. So I don't know. Ariana was fine. Like for a lord, she's serviceable. Like, would I have not fielded her at any particular point if she wasn't the lord? That's always a good question. I look at my army, and I mean, I probably would have wanted to take Nance or Joe for some of those maps. Maybe Keegan in that last one. But there's no one who I'm like dying to use instead of the archer, especially given how many flyers were on the map. Like, I probably would have started without her and then reset and then put her in. So, I think she's certainly not the worst unit I have. She's pretty usable, for sure. As a character, I think she definitely gets overshadowed by Scott a lot. I know I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Like, she's the lord. She's the show. She's the center of the show. While I think it's good to have like the ensemble cast, which I think you start to establish pretty well, and having the guidance chapters helps with that. And just given the context of the game, like it's the 7 siblings, it does feel a little strange that like there's so much emphasis on Scott and his family and like his mom and all this stuff, and like Ariana like really doesn't get any sort of like spotlight or serious development until sort of towards the end of this demo, where it like goes like, now we're in Carcino and that's where she's from, so we're going to explore her a little bit more. So I don't know, it's a little bit interesting. I think this could be remedied. I think if you gave Ariana and Scott custom classes and made it clear that they're both lords, and like the first arc is really about Scott and the second arc is really about Ariana. Like that could be interesting. I mean, you don't have to do it that formally, but I think you get what I'm saying here, where just making it a little bit clear that they share the spotlight, because there are chapters where Ariana is force deployed and Scott isn't. I think if you make it clear they're both the lords, then like that could be, I think, pretty compelling and justify like why is this guy Scott getting so much screen time? He's not even the lord. I think that would help a little bit because the way like the game is set up is that Ariana's the main lord. She's the supply convoy. She's force deployed. Scott gets a lot of screen time. He gets a game over, but he's not force deployed. Like he just feels less important. But in the dialogue would tell me the opposite, that this is really Scott's story and Ariana's kind of there supporting him. So I would just be mindful of how she's characterized and how much. I don't think you really need to do too much to like change how much screen time she gets, although maybe you could do a few things to help her stand out a little bit more. But I think just making it clear that Scott is more important will help juxtapose Ariana a little bit better. As a unit, though, she's fine. I think story-wise, like, totally fine. I think I'm curious to see kind of like what happens as like we continue to explore her backstory in Carcino. I'm curious how long you'll do that for, but overall, totally fine. Scott, Scott was good. He was really good. I mean, he's got tons of strength. He was really buff. He doubled pretty often. He could use the heavy weapons. His low skill really wasn't too much of an issue for the most part. Surprisingly, not too much of an issue considering like how bad it looks. I think that was remedied a lot by the hatchet early on, which has a lot of uses. Like I don't even think I even like I barely broke into my second one, but I still had to use them. But yeah, I mean he was really good. Character-wise, like Scott definitely, his dialogue is so casual compared to everyone else. Like when he says stuff like "yeah, baby," or the way he like calls everyone by like a shortened form of their name, he's so casual, and it's like he almost feels a little out of place. And I guess you mentioned he's your self-insert, I think, in the thread, so it would make sense that he would feel a little bit out of the world. But I would just be mindful of like how he seems compared to the others. He's definitely distinct. It's clear that he's like, I'm brash, I rush into things. Ariana's kind of the more logical one in this pair, and she helps me out think through things a little bit more. But I encourage her to act like I like their dynamic. It's a classic dynamic, and I think it works for two leading characters. But like I was just saying about Ariana, I think it should be made clear that Scott is important because he's clearly very important to the hack. Like it's all about his family. So otherwise, having an early game pirate that grows into this gargantuan beast is really fun. I think if I was to promote him with the Master Seal, he would be busted. He'd be super busted with that. He'd have over 20 strength like by level 10, by chapter 10, even sooner. Like that's pretty nutty. But yeah, he was fun to use. No real complaints here. Would I consider nerfing him? No, you could, but like I don't really think it's necessary. I think he's good. He's good at what he does. He can handle himself in situations where he should be at a disadvantage, but doesn't get borked completely. I think that's fine. He's pretty well-rounded. I would say overall, given the enemy mix in this game, he's pretty useful in multiple situations. I could rely on him in this context. So I think he's fine as is, given where he sits in this point in the game. So that's my thoughts on Scott. He was pretty good. Weston was probably MVP, in all honesty. High movement. He leveled up really well. He has access to 2 weapons that your lords don't use. He is really balanced. He's fast enough to double most things in the game. Strong enough to one-round him. He was just really useful, I would say, overall. No complaints about Weston. I don't really think that you could do anything to make him less good. I did promote him a little early, which is, my choice. But I did get some good level ups with him as well. So, like, I'm assuming he's better than the average Weston would be at, like, 15-4. But hey, he was pretty good. Early game Cavs usually have some usability. I'm curious, like, if he'll start to fall off at some point. I'm guessing he probably won't, unless the game's really long and he gets some bad level ups. But overall, Weston was pretty useful. He didn't really get too many lines, so I can't really speak to him too much as a character. He's kind of just like, we used to fight with Scott and Ariana, and that's sort of, the start and finish of his personality. Not really too much else beyond that, but hey, like, It's early. You don't have to characterize everyone super well this early on. Before we get into Sarah, let me just take a swig. So Sarah, I mean, I remember the chapter where you get Sarah. I think it's chapter 1. And I looked at him like, she's gonna be good. She's just gonna be a good early game peg, and she was. She was really solid. She's super frail, which makes her hard to use. Like that last chapter, I had to be really careful with her because she was getting too hit by those wyverns. There's definitely some pretty solid anti-flyer stuff going on in the map, like the Island of Skeleton map. I really liked where you had to like kind of dodge around. She was great against the moguls there. Played her role as a peg super well, and her drawbacks were very pronounced, but not inhibitive to using her in the way you wanted to use her. All of her drawbacks were situational, and were very much based around matchups, which I think is good for a peg. I think if you make it so that pegs don't have anything to fear, then they become too dominant. Give them some stuff to fear, but not really put it too close to anything that they want to be doing, or that they can't do both at the same time. Like, I think that's pretty good. I liked using Sarah. She was fun to use. She was super fast. I mean, with the energy ring, she had good strength. I mean, she continued to level up strength pretty well. Like, I'd say this is a pretty solid unit overall. I probably would have promoted her another level or two just to keep it moving. But yeah, Sarah was good. You might want to check on her bases or her base level a little bit, because her bases do come in quite a bit higher than the other units you get in your party. So I would consider maybe buffing her level up a little bit to fix that, because I think she does have a lot of room to grow and like get really good really quickly. So just something to keep in mind, because like you look at her stats compared to the others, and it's like, whoa, like why is she so good comparatively? But she does have low con. She only has 5 con. She does get weighed down a lot, so it's like, you know, there are balances. I don't think there's really anything too much. I would think nothing that stands out to me is like she's broken. I think she's a pretty fair unit to use, but she's good, a good Pegasus Knight. Not necessarily the best unit I've ever used, but certainly one of the better Pegasus Knights I've used. Will was excellent. Will was very good. He leveled up magic a lot. I think he leveled up magic almost every time, if not every time. He got good very quickly. I like that he starts out quite weak. He's definitely a fun growth unit to use and invest in. He certainly feels optional, right? Like, I don't need to use Will. He's not great out of the gate. I can bench him if I want and put experience elsewhere, but like, I'm glad I put experience into him because he did level up exceptionally well. He was super useful, very, offensively oriented, has pretty decent stats all around. I certainly enjoyed using him. His character is so distinct. I think it's so funny. He's like 14, but he's like talking like a little kid compared to everyone else, and they're like 14, 15, 17. It's like all these teenagers, and it's like Will feels like a total toddler by comparison, which was just kind of funny. I like his dynamic with Keegan. I like that I like that recruitment conversation where he's like big meanie. I don't think he actually says that, but he kind of insinuates that Keegan's a big meanie. But yeah, Will was pretty distinct, pretty memorable little character in this hack and fun to use. Luke, I love Luke's chin. Just like the chin edit is so good on Luke. He was really fun to use, really solid, reliable, very good in the guidance chapters that he was in. Definitely taking the lead alongside Nance. Pretty, I think I got pretty lucky with his speed. It was pretty decent. No real complaints about Luke. Nothing really I can think of to make him better or worse. I think he's just I think he's fine as is. I think you did a pretty nice job of like balancing him comparatively to the enemies that he faces, and compared to the other units. Like, I certainly wanted to use Luke and make a spot for him. Axe Cavs are just great in general, just really solid, and he's no exception. Emily, I only really had one chance to use her, but she's a healer. She's pre-promoted. She totally makes Sarah obsolete though, because she comes in, she's free, she can heal like she has C staff. Sarah's not going to be better than C at that point. She has A magic. I might lower her anima rank to B, honestly, just to like make her have not be as good by comparison. But I guess like she's like an instructor at a mage school, so it makes sense that she's better. But you have to be careful with her. She does die. But she was pretty useful as both a combat unit and a healer. Like, I would say pretty solid magic pre-promote. I like. Ariel. Ariel, I think, is another unit that just like totally obliterates the other unit that comes in. Like, I really felt, given that if Keegan used any other weapon than a sword, I would say that like her being locked to 2 range doesn't really matter. But like the fact that like Keegan's already so weak, swords are so weak. I have Katie and Michelle, who both use swords, plus Weston. Having a thief that's locked to bows doesn't necessarily feel as disadvantageous to a thief that's locked to swords, given that I have so many other units that can use the swords already. She has great resistance, like she was taking tanks from monks, it's only like a level or two and pumped into her. I think it's a fun unit concept. I think it reminds me very much of like Niles and Fates. Like I think those were definitely a more unique and memorable class and experience using those units. But Ariel is pretty solid, I would say. Really frail though. Like 4 defense, 20 HP. Like you have to be super careful with her. She's gonna draw on more attacks because she can't counter. So I think like I don't know. I don't think you want to necessarily make her bulkier, but just something to be aware of. Like she definitely has her drawbacks. Fine to use though. Can't really think too much else. You might want to nerf her res just a little bit. In all honesty, like I feel like she's super resistant, and it's not really clear why. I mean, I guess I don't really know what the trickster promotes into. Like it's supposed to promote into like the adventurer or something like that, like the bow staff class that does thieving, because that could make a little bit more sense. Or I don't know. But it just feels like very high resistance. But it's your unit, man. I mean, she was fun to use. Definitely distinct. Let's see, Katie. Katie, I got good levels with. She was pretty strong. I felt sometimes like it was a little hard for me to find a place for her because I had so many other units that were tearing it up. But Katie was pretty useful overall for a sword locked unit. I mean, between her and Michelle, like she's always going to get compared to Michelle because they're both like these light infantry sword ladies. And Katie, I think, at first I was like leaning towards Michelle a little bit because Michelle's stats were a bit better, but Katie really dialed it up. She got some good level ups. She can use the rapier. She can use the shamshir. I think probably like 9 out of 10 players are going to come into this hack and say that Katie is better than Michelle and immediately bench Michelle. I don't know what else you can really do to make Katie more distinct from Michelle, or rather Michelle more distinct from Katie, so they don't just feel kind of superfluous. I mean, they're both pretty useful combat-wise. Like I probably would have brought Michelle if I had an extra slot, for example. So a bit tricky to say, but that comparison point is really important because you don't want it to be super obvious which unit to take in a situation like that. You want there to be a clear trade-off, and like when their stats are really similar and Katie has the extra weapon, that's very useful for most of the game. Plus she gets a horse. Like I just don't see how Michelle's promoted crit stands up to all that. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my take on it. I'm not really sure what else you would do here to make them more distinct. And I would also just double check to make sure that Katie can actually promote with the Master Seal, if that's intended. Unless Katie's like actually really important, I just don't know. Is she like the missing 7th sibling? I don't really know. Christia, I think I just got really bad luck with her. She's slow. She's definitely like, it's like you were saying to me over Discord, WarPath, like she's definitely like your typical dark mage type unit. She hits hard. She's slow. You got to be careful with her. She's a player phase nuke. She has decent luck, so she can dodge. She definitely dodged a couple things. Her defense and resistance are both pretty decent. She did a couple of things pretty well for me, I would say overall. But like she got doubled in that chapter. I think it was chapter 8. She got doubled by wyverns, which was pretty scary. But yeah, Christia was fine. Like useful in her joint chapter and the guided maps. No real complaints there. Definitely, very attack heavy, but that's fine. I don't really know what else to say. Like she was usable. She was probably one of the closest units to riding the bench in my squad, but I also just prefer having like a good magic user. Michelle, I kind of touched on Michelle when I was talking about Katie. Pretty useful, but not really like worth using compared to Katie. Like Katie's just better, I think overall. Maybe my Katie was better. Maybe Michelle's supposed to be better combat-wise. I'm not sure. But Michelle definitely feels a little superfluous by comparison. I could use both of them and be fine. But this hack doesn't have so many axe users by comparison, especially because Neighbor Lords are sword users. It's not really balanced that way. So it's definitely a bit different to say like how useful Myrmidon's going to be in FE8. when everything's going to be a little bit different because the lords are different. So, like, there's a lot of flying enemies because your lord's a bow user, right? Like, you're always going to have a counter to that. It's not like most FEs where it's like there's going to be a ton of axe users because your lord's a sword user. So it's a little bit different. Michelle was fine. Like, I don't really know what I would do to make her stand out a little bit more. I would also say too, like, and caveat all this by saying, like, it's fine that not every unit is as good or has an equal trade-off to another unit. Like, some units are just going to be worse, and that's okay, as long as the unit is good versus the game that they're in. And Michelle is certainly usable in the game. Kayla was pretty useful. I liked her. She was a healer. She has good resistance. She has good speed. She has good magic. Definitely felt like I didn't really need her after getting Emily and promoting Will with tight deployment slots. I might have brought her if I wanted a third unit that could heal and have Will in a more attacking focused role. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I can say about Kayla. She was a healer. She did her job well. Promoting Will definitely kind of made her feel a little less useful overall, but you know, that's what happens when you promote your other magic users. They're going to fall off. And so she does her role fine for the early game. I mean, we're already 9 chapters in. She's level 12. Like, I would definitely continue to use her, but it's fine if you don't take your healers into the mid or late game. That's totally fine. Sarah, I covered Sarah a little bit, but like, there's no reason to use her. She does have C status, so she's the same as Emily on the staff in the staff rank. Her stats aren't really that great. Like, compared to Kayla, like, Kayla's just way better. Like, less resistance, less magic, less skill, less speed, a little bit more luck, less defense. Yeah, she has a mount, but so does Emily. I just don't really. She just feels really superfluous. I mean, she's useful in the chapters that she's in because you need heals, but after those guidance, it's like, all right, I'm gonna bench this unit. So, let's see. As far as what I would do to make her better, I think just like make her stats a little bit better. Maybe have. I would almost say, like, why not just have Emily join instead in those guidance chapters, but that might be too much. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to do with this character, but she definitely was like, I used her for the 2 guide maps, and I was like, peace out. No reason to use you. Sammy definitely follows the typical Armor Knight arc of good when you first get them, and then progressively gets worse and worse until the maps get too big to bother bringing them. Sammy was just getting a little too slow, and that's fine. Sammy was very useful in her early maps, and then progressively became less useful. I would say standout for me was maybe trying to think. Yeah, she was fine. Nothing really stood out to me about her performance, honestly, besides missing a ton with the Horse Slayer in the Forest chapter. But she's a fine Armor Knight. I would consider beefing up her level a little bit and giving her slightly better stats to incentivize using her a little bit more long term. But given the curve of the hack so far, and that when you intend to have people promote like around that chapter 9-8 mark where you get the master seals, like Sammy's going to start being less useful anyway at that point. So like, not really worthwhile long term. But like, fine as an Armor Knight. Lances are fine. Like, she has pretty good lance rank for early on in the game. Like, she can use all the special stuff. She's perfectly serviceable. Probably would have been decent in that defend chapter with the Wyverns if I was playing a little bit more slowly, but I like to move fast, so she got the bench. But I like her character design concept, like the eye patch and the red hair. I think that's pretty cool. Andrew. Oh man, Andrew. I liked Andrew. I wanted to use him, but I just didn't find a spot for him. I think vanilla lightning tomes are just like not really very good, which I think just makes Andrew less useful. Plus, Christia just has so much more magic. Will is just steamrolling. Like, he's definitely good if you didn't. He's probably going to be useful if you didn't use Will, or if you don't want to use Christia for whatever reason, like you find her too slow. I think he would have been serviceable, but I think I don't know. I would have needed to get some more levels into him. Like, his stats are decent for his level. Low luck, low defense. Yeah, like, I don't really know what else to say about him. I feel like it's tough because how do you distinguish the difference between the mages, the monks, and the shaman? I mean, the reality is, it's like, res is so low that it barely matters what weapon. Res on physical units is so low that it barely matters what type of magic you're using to attack them with. In the magic triangle, it's like everyone has high resistance, so it also doesn't really matter. So it's really just about like who has the best stats and who has the best tomes. Monks have the disadvantage in vanilla because they usually have access to the worst tomes in the game, which are the light magic tomes. So I don't know. I think maybe make the monks a little bit faster, change up the light tomes a little bit. I think that might help. Definitely just look at some tweaks that you can do to the light magic tomes to make them a little bit more viable. Andrew was certainly useful when he was force deployed, but I think he's definitely struggled to keep up with some of my other units. Like, you saw the stats, like, he doesn't really hold much of a candle to them, unfortunately. Keegan. Oh man, Keegan getting wrecked by the Sword Reaver in his joint chapter was super funny. I like the way that everyone kind of shits on Keegan too throughout the course of the game. It's clear that he's, definitely the black sheep of the 7 siblings. I like his dynamic. I just feel like he definitely had like more personality than some of the other characters for sure. He was fine. He's a thief. He does thief stuff. He's not very good at combat. I just think Ariel's so much better to use. I mean, she has 11 points of res on him, which is pretty insane, especially because you do throw a fair number of magic units at me. I don't know what else I would do. I feel like I'm trying to think what else I would do to make Keegan more viable, but I can't really think of anything. I mean, I could have used 2 thieves. I probably should have used 2 thieves in this last chapter, but didn't think it was necessary for the pace I wanted to move. And if I had brought Keegan, I probably would have gotten to the boss. Maybe I could have, but I don't think it would have happened. Jeremiah I didn't use, so I can't really comment on him. He looks fine, but I just don't really go for wyverns usually. Not sure why. It's just never really my thing. He has low luck, which is going to be a bit of a drag, but I didn't get to use him, so I can't really comment. Joe, I love Joe. Joe's character is great. He's fun dude, fun to use. Yeah, not really too much else to say there. I feel like he joins just a little bit too late. Like, at the point where he joins, it's like probably where I would be like, if Joe joined in chapter 1, that'd be incredible, right? He would be awesome. But because Joe joins in like chapter 8, 9, it's like, well, you're already like worse than some of my other units. So I don't know what I would do here. I think it makes sense that Joe doesn't appear in your army until that point in the story, but I definitely wasn't in a rush to deploy him by the time I got him, as much as I wanted to use him. Similar with Nancy, she was great in her guidance chapters, and then once I had everyone, she was a little bit slower, not as strong. I mean, she's definitely a good hedge if your units get really screwed or if anyone dies, but useful. I would say most useful in her guidance chapters for sure. Really fun unit. Female heroes were always fun. And then we have Jordan. I didn't even bother. Just Christia outclasses him immediately. He's got really low luck. His other stats aren't really anything special. He doesn't really offer. He has 3 con. He doesn't offer me anything. He offers me nothing. You'll definitely want to beef him up considerably if you want it to even be worth considering using him over Christia. But I think generally all the sibling characters are going to be the best, kind of like the Fates Royals, and then Tethys, who we don't actually use. But that's the characters. As far as my general thoughts on the game, ambush spawns. I hate ambush spawns. They are not fun for the player. There isn't really anything insinuating that they're going to come. I would definitely change those to player phase spawns. If you want to do ambush spawns, you've got to be really diligent about how you hint to the player that they're coming and make it very clear, because the player doesn't expect ambush spawns. I mean, that's why they're ambush spawns, right? It has ambush in the name. It's supposed to be a surprise. You need to make it so clear to the player that ambush spawns are going to happen. Whether it be like these guys are going to come from the spot in this time, or you establish like forts that are far away is where enemies come from, right? Like, there's going to be some things you need to do to establish that they're coming. I don't think it's the best game design decision. I think you're going to piss a lot of people off. Most people do not like ambush spawns. I don't blame them. I think with ambush spawns, you have to worry about player pacing a lot more, because you got to make sure that there's always enough room for them to move and not attack that first turn. So I think you're making it harder for yourself with ambush spawns as a designer, in my opinion. The maps are also, in general, I think we have a lot of interesting concepts for maps. I think you just need to do some tweaking to improve the execution on them, whether it be with like decreasing enemy density and buffing enemy stats to make it a little bit more player phase oriented, which I think is a more engaging way to play Fire Emblem in general, and especially with a Bowlord, like, you want more player phase oriented combat. And the maps are just a little too big. I definitely felt like there were some maps where I'm dragging my units along. I saw you made a couple of edits already to some of the maps, which is great. I think tightening these up a little bit is going to make it go a long way. And then just cleaning up the maps as well. Refer to Vanilla, look at other hacks, and see how they're putting their maps together. I wasn't very good at maps either when I first started out, but I think you have a pretty good I would call it like blueprints of maps. I think you just need to tighten them, and then you can clean them up, and I think they'll be really fun to play. But there's a lot of good stuff in here. I'm excited to see where this goes. I think you have some interesting ideas. I would say my favorite chapter. Oh man. The chapter with Will and the Island of Skeletons was really fun. I liked that one a lot. I would say, let's see. I like the Survive Fog of War chapter. I wouldn't say it was my favorite though. Trying to think which ones really were my favorites. The Selena map was pretty cool. Just because you had to rush so much to get the chests and kind of the plot twist reveal. Like I really liked that. I thought it was a good I just felt it was like one of the more meaningful chapters in the game. In all honesty. As far as maps I didn't like, the first map I thought was weak. The random movement zombies having to kind of dilly-dally around a little bit. I just don't think it's a great prologue. It felt very RPG-ish. Like traditional RPG-ish. Like you're in the village and it's like then you get the enemies. Like it's, I don't know. It reminded me of some of like the jankiness of Gaiden, to be honest. So I wouldn't say that was my favorite. That Gaiden chapter where you're in the mage school I didn't love because it was just really big and super dense. It was just kind of boring. But everything else I think is like, it was big but just needs a little bit of work. It's kind of like, I feel like what I said about every map. And I'm excited to see where this goes, man. So I encourage everyone to give this hack a try. It's definitely a different experience. Definitely a little rough around the edges right now, but I think it'll clean up real nicely in the coming months. And I'm looking forward to playing this again when that happens. But thanks again for watching, guys. My name is Panda, and this is my cursor. And this has been Fire Emblem: The Seven Siblings, a ROM hack by WarPath. And I look forward to trying something new soon. So I think this is actually going to upload right around the time when Dream of 5 is finished uploading. And so I'll have some new stuff ready at that point, and we'll take it from there, guys. But anyway, until then, I will see you soon. Take care.